Mafia boss goes on a blind date with the waitress as a bet and is shocked when. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In a city filled with luxury and wealth, it's easy to forget the ones who live on the other side. Emma Carter was one of those people. She worked at a high-end restaurant downtown, earning just enough to keep her head above water. At the age of 24, she had no time for herself. Her life was made up of long shifts, cleaning up after the city's elite, barely scraping by to cover rent and bills. Emma had learned early on that she couldn't afford to dream. Her life was about survival. But one night, everything was about to change. As she moved through the tables, serving drinks and appetizers, her heart skipped a beat when she saw him. The man everyone feared, Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss. His reputation was enough to silence a room, and even in a crowded restaurant, his presence was undeniable. He was dressed in an immaculate suit, his dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made the air feel thick. Emma had heard whispers about Dominic, the youngest Don to ever control the Romano family. His name was synonymous with power and danger. No one dared cross him. Yet, here she was, serving him like any other customer, keeping her head down, trying not to draw attention. But fate had other plans. Dominic's gaze caught hers, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place, but it sent a chill down her spine. He didn't speak, but his presence commanded her attention. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would turn her life upside down. Later that evening, as she was bringing a bottle of wine to his table, Dominic's voice stopped her in her tracks. "You," he said, his tone cool and calculated. "I have a proposition for you." Emma's heart raced. She didn't know what he wanted, but the way he said it made her uneasy. "A proposition," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic leaned in slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm willing to pay you $10,000 if you agree to go on a blind date with me. Just for one evening. It's a bet, nothing more." Her mind raced. This was insane. She was being offered more money than she'd made in months, just to go on a date with the Mafia boss. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew there was something more to this than just a simple wager. She could feel it. Dominic was used to getting whatever he wanted, and in that moment, it was clear that he expected her to accept without question. But Emma wasn't like the others. She wasn't afraid of him, or at least, not enough to back down. What could it hurt? She needed the money, and maybe, just maybe, this would be her chance to change everything. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I'll do it. But I'm not going to make this easy for you." Dominic smiled, a cold, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said, as he stood up and walked away, leaving her standing there, wondering just how much her life was about to change. The bet had been set, and as much as Emma tried to brush it off, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple dinner date. The next few days passed in a blur. Emma found herself caught in a whirlwind of preparation for her date with Dominic Romano. She had never expected her life to take this turn. One minute, she was just a waitress trying to get by, and the next, she was preparing for a blind date with a Mafia boss. The money was tempting, the offer of $10,000 dangling like a lifeline, but deep down, she knew this wasn't just about the money. There was something about Dominic that unnerved her. The day before the date, Emma stood in front of her small closet, staring at the few outfits she owned. She had always dressed simply for work, a black skirt and white blouse, nothing extravagant. Now, faced with the prospect of dining with one of the most powerful men in New York, she realized she had nothing fitting for the occasion. A pang of panic shot through her chest. She couldn't show up to this date looking like she belonged in the service industry. She was about to give up when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Marco, the head waiter at the restaurant, with a simple message: "I've taken care of it. Pick up the dress from the boutique around the corner." Emma blinked, not understanding. She had no idea what Marco meant, but curiosity got the best of her. She slipped on her shoes and hurried out the door. The boutique was small, tucked away on a side street. When she entered, the shopkeeper, an elegant older woman with sharp eyes, handed her a sleek black dress. "Compliments of Mr. Romano," the woman said, with a knowing smile. The dress was beautiful, long, silk, and perfectly cut to fit her body in all the right places. Emma's hands trembled as she touched the fabric, overwhelmed by the thought that Dominic Romano had arranged this for her. She had no idea what kind of game he was playing, but she was now very much a part of it. That evening, Emma stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the dress. It was a perfect fit. She hardly recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked confident, poised, ready for a night far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Yet, her stomach twisted with nerves. When she arrived at the restaurant, Marco greeted her with a nod, and she was led to a private corner where Dominic was already waiting. As she entered the dimly lit room, his gaze immediately locked onto hers. He was sitting at the table, his posture straight, his eyes as cold and unreadable as ever. "Emma," he said, his voice deep and smooth, almost too calm. "You look—" His words trailed off as he took in her appearance, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes, something more than the usual indifference. "Stunning," he finished, his voice softer than she expected. "Thank you," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though she could feel the warmth spreading through her cheeks. She had to admit, Dominic Romano was everything people said he was: powerful, intimidating, and undeniably handsome. The way he looked at her made her feel exposed, like he could see straight through her, into the very heart of her. As they sat down to dinner, the conversation started off awkwardly. Emma didn't know what to say. The man in front of her was not only one of the wealthiest and most dangerous figures in New York, but also a complete stranger. "So, tell me," Dominic said, breaking the silence. "Why did you agree to this?" Emma hesitated, unsure of how to answer. She couldn't tell him the real reason, the desperate need for money, the way she had hoped this would give her a way out of her struggles. Instead, she kept it simple. "I thought it would be a way to change things, even for just one night." He studied her for a moment, his gaze piercing. "And now that you're here, how does it feel?" he asked, his tone more curious than mocking. The question threw her off. She had come into this thinking she could keep her emotions at bay, just play along for the money. But there was something in the way he asked that made her pause. "I don't know," she replied, looking down at her hands. "It feels surreal." Dominic nodded slowly, as if he understood something she didn't. He didn't say anything more, but his expression softened just a fraction. For a moment, it felt as though they were two people caught in an odd situation, each trying to make sense of it. The night went on, with them exchanging casual pleasantries. Despite the tension between them, Emma couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward him. There was more to Dominic Romano than the rumors and stories. He wasn't just the ruthless Mafia boss. There were glimpses of something else, a man who carried burdens, who hid his true self behind layers of control. As the evening wound down, Emma felt something shift in the air, an unspoken tension building between them. Dominic pushed his chair back and stood, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've been a good sport, Emma," he said, his voice now low and intimate. "But I'm not done with you yet." Her heart skipped a beat. She had agreed to this date, but now, standing in front of him, she realized that this was only the beginning of something far bigger, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. The evening had taken a turn that Emma never expected. She had thought this would be a simple date, a chance to earn money and get out of her daily grind. But as Dominic stood before her, his cold eyes softened for a moment. She realized that what she had gotten herself into was far more complicated. He had not just been toying with her. There was something deeper beneath his actions. They walked through the restaurant, with Dominic's hand resting gently on her lower back. Despite herself, Emma felt a strange warmth at the contact. It wasn't a gesture of affection, but a subtle, possessive touch. It was as if he was laying claim to her without saying a word. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the noise of the city faded behind them, replaced by the hum of the luxurious car waiting outside. The ride to Dominic's penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional click of his phone as he typed out messages. Emma sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this really just a bet to him, or was there more? Her heart raced with confusion, but she couldn't ignore the tension building between them. When they arrived, Dominic led her up to his penthouse in complete silence. The building itself was a masterpiece, with marble floors and elegant, minimalist decor. Everything about it screamed wealth and power. The lights flickered on as they entered, casting soft shadows against the walls. Emma felt small in the expansive space, even though she had been in places far grander before. This was different. This was a world she had never been a part of. Dominic made his way to the bar and poured himself a drink, his movements graceful and deliberate. He didn't look at her as he spoke. "I hope you're not expecting this to be some kind of fairy tale, Emma," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge of something more dangerous lurking beneath. "You're here because I need you to play a part. Nothing more, nothing less." Emma nodded, swallowing hard. She knew that already. But what did he mean by that? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a bet. Dominic Romano wasn't the type of man to make such an offer without some hidden agenda. "Relax," he continued, turning to face her. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give, but I am giving you the opportunity to change your life. Do you understand?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what he meant, but she had to admit that the offer was tempting. $10,000 was more than she had earned in a year, and for one night, it felt like a dream come true. But she knew better than to fall for the illusion. There had to be a catch. "I understand," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if she truly did. Dominic took a slow sip of his drink, studying her with an intensity that made her nervous. "Good," he said finally. "Then let's make this night count." The tension in the room grew as they stood there, facing each other. Emma was caught between the strange pull she felt toward him and the realization that she was completely out of her depth. She wasn't just playing a part in a game. She was caught in a web spun by a man who could destroy her with a single word. And yet, she couldn't deny the attraction that simmered beneath the surface. It was dangerous, reckless, but undeniably real. "Are you ready?" Dominic asked, his voice low, his gaze never leaving hers. Emma hesitated. Was she ready? To enter a world so far removed from her own? To play the role he wanted her to play? "I think so," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, and for a brief moment, Emma thought she saw a flicker of something soft behind his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Good," Dominic said, walking toward her. "Then let's see how far you're willing to go for this." He stepped closer, and Emma felt the air between them grow thick with unspoken tension. She wanted to pull away, but something in his presence held her in place. It was as if she was being drawn into a storm, knowing that once she was caught, there would be no turning back. For the first time, Emma wondered what exactly she had gotten herself into. The night had taken a new turn, and Emma was still trying to process everything that had happened. Dominic's words echoed in her mind as she stood in his luxurious penthouse. He wasn't asking for anything she didn't want to give, he said. Yet, she couldn't help but feel the pressure of being trapped in a world she didn't understand, playing a part that felt more real with each passing moment. Dominic walked to the window, staring out at the skyline. The lights of the city stretched out in front of them, a perfect reflection of the life he led, beautiful, cold, and distant. Emma stood there, unsure of what to do next. She had agreed to play this role, to pretend, but was that all she was? Just a pawn in a game where she didn't know the rules? She wanted to ask him more questions, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. "Do you ever wonder why people like us end up in these situations?" Dominic's voice cut through the quiet, his back still turned to her. Emma blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. There was something different in his voice now, softer, almost vulnerable. But she couldn't let her guard down. "Not with him." "No," she said, her voice firm. "I don't think I ever thought about it." Dominic chuckled darkly. "Most people don't. They think power is just given to those who are lucky or ruthless enough to take it. But power, real power, is earned in ways most people can't even imagine." Emma watched him closely, wondering if he was talking about more than just his empire. Was he speaking about himself? About the walls he had built around his heart? "What about you?" he asked, turning to face her now, his eyes intense. "Do you think you have what it takes to survive in a world like this?" His question hung in the air between them. She could feel the weight of it, the challenge in his gaze. Emma swallowed hard. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've survived my own battles, but I've never had to deal with something like this. Dominic studied her, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, slowly, he walked over to the bar and poured another drink. You're right. You're not like the others. You have something about you. She wasn't sure if he meant it as a compliment, but something about the way he said it made her feel both exposed and strangely powerful. As he handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushed, and Emma felt a spark of electricity shoot through her. She quickly pulled her hand back, confused by the sudden rush of feelings she couldn't control. Take a seat, Dominic said, gesturing to the plush chair in front of him. Let's talk. Let's make this night interesting. Emma hesitated, but eventually sat down, still holding the glass in her hand. She didn't know what he was expecting from her, but she was no longer sure what she wanted either. Was this just a game for him? Or was there something more beneath the surface? Dominic took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers. You're wondering what happens next, aren't you? Emma nodded, her heart racing. Yeah, I am. He smiled, a slow, almost predatory smile that sent a shiver down her spine. What happens next is entirely up to you. You play along, and I'll make sure your life changes in ways you can't even imagine. But you need to understand one thing. Emma leaned forward slightly, eager to hear what he had to say. In my world, Dominic continued, there are no second chances. Once you're in, there's no getting out. Do you understand that? Emma's throat went dry. The weight of his words settled over her like a thick fog. What had she gotten herself into? She wanted to run, to walk away and pretend none of this had happened. But she knew, deep down, that there was no going back. Not now. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I understand. Dominic's gaze softened for just a moment, and for the first time that evening, Emma saw a glimpse of the man beneath the hardened exterior. There was pain in his eyes, something he had buried deep within himself, but it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. Good, he said, his voice now low and serious. Let's see where this goes then. Emma nodded, unsure of what to expect, but feeling a strange sense of anticipation growing within her. She didn't know if she was ready for the storm she had just walked into, but she couldn't turn back now. Dominic turned away, his mind already on something else. Tomorrow, we'll begin, he said. But tonight, let's see if you can keep up with me. The challenge in his voice was clear, and Emma couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. She wasn't just playing a part anymore. She was a player in his world now, and whatever happened next, she knew it would change her life forever. The next morning, Emma awoke to the soft hum of the city below. The early morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of the guest room in Dominic's penthouse, casting long shadows on the polished floors. Her head felt heavy, the events of the previous night still fresh in her mind. She had never expected to be here, not in a place like this, not with someone like him. Dominic had left early that morning, as he always did, and the penthouse was eerily quiet. Emma sat up in bed, her fingers gripping the edge of the silk sheets. Her mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? She had come into this with one goal, to change her life, to escape the life of waiting tables and scraping by. But this was different. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. She had been so caught up in the whirlwind of Dominic's world that she hadn't really thought about the consequences. The money, the power, the allure of a life so different from her own. It had all seemed like an easy choice. But now that she was in the thick of it, she wasn't sure what she was supposed to do. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a staff member standing there, holding a tray of breakfast. Mr. Romano requested you have this before you leave, the staff member said with a polite smile. Thank you, Emma replied, taking the tray. She wasn't sure where she was supposed to go or what her next move should be. Dominic had made it clear that he wasn't interested in anything long-term, that this was just a deal. But something about the way he looked at her last night, the way he touched her hand, it didn't feel like just a transaction. As she ate breakfast, she tried to clear her mind. She couldn't afford to overthink this. It was just a game. That's what she had told herself. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized that she wasn't just playing a part anymore. She had become entangled in something much bigger than she could control. When Dominic returned later that day, he found her sitting in the living room, lost in thought. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes scanned her, as if reading her. You seem quiet today, he remarked, his voice smooth but with a hint of curiosity. I'm just thinking, she replied. her voice steady despite the whirlwind in her mind. About what's next? Dominic took a step closer, his presence overwhelming in the room. What's next is up to you, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. You wanted to change your life. Now you need to decide how far you're willing to go. Emma swallowed, the weight of his words sinking in. He had warned her before, but now, standing in front of her, it felt like the truth of his world was bearing down on her. There were no second chances. If she wanted to be a part of this life, she had to be fully committed, no hesitation. She stood up, feeling the need to regain some control over the situation. And what does that mean for me? She asked, her voice low but steady. Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze intense. It means you need to make a choice. You've seen what I can offer you. Power. Money. The life you've always dreamed of. But you have to decide if you're willing to live in a world where nothing is as it seems. Emma's heart raced. She had always wanted more, always dreamed of a life beyond the small apartment and the waitressing shifts. But was she ready to pay the price? She didn't know if she was strong enough to be part of his world. And yet, deep down, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him, to the power he exuded, to the mystery that surrounded him. I'm ready, she said, her voice firmer now. I'll play your game, but I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. Dominic smiled, a slow, calculating smile that sent a chill down her spine. That's what I like to hear, he said, his voice low and filled with approval. We'll begin then, and when it's over, you'll have everything you've ever wanted. Or nothing at all. Emma nodded, her mind made up. There was no turning back now. As she stood there, facing Dominic, she realized that this was no longer just about money or status. It was about power, the power to choose her future, to take control of her life in a way she never had before. And as much as she tried to tell herself it was just a game, deep inside, she knew that she was already losing herself in this dangerous game of his. The following days passed in a haze, each one blurring into the next as Emma adjusted to her new reality. She had committed herself to Dominic's world, a world filled with danger, power, and luxury, everything she had dreamed of but never thought she could have. But now that she was living it, she couldn't help but feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Dominic was distant at times, his icy exterior never faltering, but there were moments when his guard seemed to slip. In those moments, Emma saw glimpses of the man behind the Mafia boss. He wasn't just a ruthless businessman or a cold-hearted leader. There was more to him. And though she tried to remind herself that she was only in this for the money, those moments made it harder to keep her emotions in check. It was a late evening when things started to shift. Dominic had invited her to a private dinner at his penthouse, a rare occasion when he wasn't surrounded by bodyguards or business partners. She arrived to find the apartment bathed in soft light, the view of the city skyline stretching out in front of them. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. She still wasn't used to this world, the opulence, the power, the way Dominic moved through it all with effortless grace. Tonight is about you and me, Dominic said as she entered, his voice low but commanding. No business, no expectations. Just us. Emma tried to keep her cool, reminding herself that she was playing a part. But as he led her to the dining table, a nervous flutter rose in her chest. What did he mean by just us? Was this a test? Or was there something more? The dinner itself was exquisite, and as the evening wore on, Emma found herself relaxing. Dominic was surprisingly charming, his words softening as the wine flowed. He asked her about her life before she had come into his world, the little things that had made her who she was. It was strange, this new side of him. For the first time, she felt like she was seeing him not as a mafia boss, but as a man, one who had been shaped by his own past, just like her. You never answered my question from the other night, Dominic said, breaking the silence. Do you think you have what it takes to survive in this world? Emma looked at him, her thoughts racing. She had been avoiding that question, unsure of how to answer. But now, in the quiet of the evening, with the soft clink of silverware and the distant hum of the city below, she felt ready to give him the truth. I don't know, she admitted, her voice steady. But I'm willing to find out. Dominic studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if looking for something. She wasn't sure what it was, but for the first time, she felt like he was letting her in. Good, he said softly, setting his wine glass down. Because in this world, you can't afford to doubt yourself. The moment you start second-guessing your choices, everything falls apart. Emma nodded, taking in his words. She had seen that firsthand. The world Dominic lived in was unforgiving, and she had to learn to navigate it quickly if she wanted to survive. The conversation turned lighter as the evening continued, and for the first time, Emma began to feel a sense of normalcy between them. There was no pressure, no hidden agenda, just two people sharing a quiet dinner. But as the night wore on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She had made the decision to follow Dominic into his world, but there was still so much she didn't know. There were parts of him he hadn't shown her yet, and the deeper she got, the more she wondered what the true cost of being with him would be. As the evening drew to a close, Dominic stood and walked toward the window, his back to her. "I hope you understand," he said quietly. "This life, this world, it's not for everyone. It will test you in ways you can't imagine. But if you make it, there's nothing else like it." Emma stood, her heart pounding in her chest. "I understand," she said, though she wasn't sure she did. The world he had offered her was far more complicated than she had imagined. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and yet, it held a certain allure. "Good," Dominic said, turning to face her. "Because this is just the beginning. We'll see how far you can go." And in that moment, Emma realized that she was in this for more than just the money. She had become entangled in something much bigger than herself, and there was no going back now. She had to choose whether to embrace the life Dominic had to offer or walk away. But deep down, she knew she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not when she could feel the pull of power, danger, and something else, something she hadn't fully understood yet, but was beginning to crave. The days after their dinner were a blur for Emma. Dominic's words, his challenge to her, echoed in her mind like a drumbeat she couldn't escape. "We'll see how far you can go." She had agreed to play his game, but as time passed, she began to realize just how deep that game went. She was no longer just pretending to be part of his world. She was becoming part of it, for better or worse. She had settled into her new life with him, navigating the luxuries and dangers of his empire with a mixture of excitement and fear. She had learned the rules quickly: keep her head down, do what she was told, and never question his authority. But the more time she spent with him, the more she realized how little she understood about the man behind the power. It was a Thursday evening when everything shifted again. Emma had been in the penthouse all day, alone for the most part. Dominic had been gone for meetings, leaving her to her thoughts. She had spent her time exploring the various rooms of the apartment, getting more familiar with the space. It was strange to think that just a week ago, she was still living paycheck to paycheck, and now she was living in a place like this, surrounded by wealth that felt almost suffocating. As evening approached, she heard the familiar sound of the elevator. Dominic was back, but something felt different tonight. There was an urgency in the way he stepped into the room, his suit sharp, his expression tense. He didn't acknowledge her at first, but walked straight to the bar, pouring himself a drink with a steady hand. "Is everything okay?" Emma asked, unable to hold back the question. Dominic paused for a moment, then turned to face her. His eyes were darker than usual, his jaw clenched tight. "There's a situation. Nothing you need to worry about." His voice was cold, distant. Emma felt a pang of unease. "What situation?" she pressed. He didn't answer right away, his eyes narrowing as if he was weighing his next words. "I don't want you involved, Emma," he said finally. "It's not your problem." She nodded slowly, but inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was already more involved than he realized. Everything about his world was a risk, and she knew that the deeper she got, the harder it would be to stay out of the dangerous things he was involved in. Dominic continued to pace, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. "There are people who don't like what I'm doing," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "They'll stop at nothing to bring me down." Emma's heart raced. She had heard the whispers, seen the tension in the air when he was around others. She had known that Dominic was powerful, but she hadn't realized just how many enemies he had, how fragile that power truly was. "I don't want you to get hurt," he said, his voice suddenly softer. "Stay out of it, please." Emma stood there for a moment, her thoughts racing. She had made the decision to stay, to play his game. But this wasn't just about her anymore. Dominic was in danger, and even if she didn't want to admit it, she cared about him. She didn't want to watch him fall apart. "I'm not afraid of you," she said quietly, surprising herself with the words. "And I'm not going to sit back and pretend nothing's happening." If you're going to let me be part of this, I want to be part of it for real. Dominic froze. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she thought he might say something. Something that would make everything clear, that would explain why he had drawn her into this dangerous world in the first place. But instead, he just shook his head slowly, his lips curling into a tight smile. I knew you'd say that, he said, his voice dark with approval. You're exactly what I need. Emma felt a surge of determination rise inside her. She wasn't just a pawn in his world anymore. She was becoming something more. Then let me help, she said, her voice firm. I'm not going anywhere. Dominic studied her for a long moment, his gaze softening just slightly. I don't want to drag you into this, he said, his tone low. But I think you're already in deeper than you realize. Emma stepped forward, closing the space between them. Then let's do this together, she said, her voice steady. Dominic remained silent, his gaze unreadable. But Emma saw the flicker of something in his eyes, something close to respect. And in that moment, she knew that she had made the right choice. She was no longer just playing his game. She was in it for real. Dominic took a deep breath, then nodded. All right, he said, his voice soft but resolute. We do this my way. But I warn you, Emma, once you're in, there's no going back. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She was ready for whatever came next. With Dominic, she knew she was stepping into a world of danger, but she also knew she wasn't going to be the one left behind. She was in this to win it. And nothing, not even Dominic's empire, was going to stop her now. The days after Emma's decision to stand by Dominic felt like they moved faster than she could keep up with. What had started as a game, a bet, now seemed like an irreversible plunge into a world she had no experience in. Yet somehow, everything about it felt oddly natural. She had no illusions about what she was involved in, no belief that everything would magically turn out fine. This was not a fairy tale. But the more she spent time in Dominic's world, the more she realized how much she had come to crave the very things that came with it. Power, control, respect. It was a week later when everything truly changed. Dominic had called her into his office, the first time in days he had seemed genuinely present, not distracted by the endless stream of business deals or the constant movement of his criminal empire. There was something in his eyes when he looked at her, something serious. He didn't need to say much for Emma to know that whatever he was about to say would alter everything. Sit down, Emma, Dominic said, his tone unusually soft for the man who had always spoken with such authority. Emma sat across from him, her heart beginning to race. It wasn't like him to be so reserved. The power in his presence was something she had grown accustomed to. But today, it felt like there was something else, something more vulnerable. We've been moving fast, Dominic started, his voice steady. But there was a tinge of something in it. Regret, maybe. Or just the weight of his own thoughts. I'm not the kind of man who takes his time with things. I never have been. But this? It's different. Emma's brow furrowed. What's different? Dominic looked at her, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something human in his gaze. I've put you in a dangerous position, Emma. You're part of this world now, and I don't know if you realize what that means. Emma leaned forward, determined. I'm in this, Dominic. I've made my choice. But don't think for a second that I'm not ready for it. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. There was something else brewing beneath the surface, something that he wasn't saying. He stood up, pacing slowly across the room, his back to her. You think you're ready for this life? He asked quietly, his voice distant, but still carrying that underlying weight. Because once you're in, there's no going back. This isn't like anything you've ever known. You can't just walk away. I'm not going anywhere, Emma replied, her voice firm despite the uncertainty she felt inside. I've already made my choice. Dominic turned toward her, his expression hardening. Then you need to understand the price. There are enemies watching. I've made a lot of decisions in my life that have brought me to this point. But now there are those who want to take it all from me. And they'll do anything to get to me. Emma's stomach clenched. She had known the danger, but hearing it from him made it all the more real. He wasn't just some untouchable mafia boss. He was a man who had made enemies, who was constantly looking over his shoulder. She could see the burden that weighed on him, the isolation that came with such power. And now, she was part of it. I'm not scared, she said, her voice quieter now, but still strong. You think you're the only one with enemies? She leaned back, staring at him, letting the words sink in. I've spent my whole life surviving, Dominic. This is no different. He paused, studying her. No, he said, a slight smile tugging at his lips. It's not the same. But you're tougher than I gave you credit for. Emma didn't flinch. She had no time to second-guess herself. She was already in the middle of a storm, and if she wanted to come out of it, she had to stand firm. Dominic walked over to the desk, his hands resting on the surface as he looked out the window. You'll need to stay sharp. We're about to go into a fight that's bigger than anything we've faced before. There's a war coming, Emma. And it's not just about us anymore. The weight of his words settled over her. A war. She knew it wasn't just the business world he was talking about. She could see it in his eyes. The stakes were higher now, and everything they had built could come crumbling down at any moment. I'm with you, she said, the words coming easier than she expected. I've got your back. He turned to face her, his eyes hardening again, but this time, there was a glimmer of something softer behind the steel. You say that now, but I need you to be ready. When it comes, it won't be easy. You'll see people fall. You'll have to make choices. But in the end, you'll either rise or you'll drown. Emma stood up, walking toward him. For the first time, she felt the full weight of the power they held between them. I'm ready, she said. I won't drown. Dominic looked at her for a long time, his gaze piercing. Then, with a slow nod, he spoke. Good. Because this is just the beginning. As the night fell around them, Emma realized that there was no going back. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. And as dangerous as it was, she had never felt more alive. The days that followed Dominic's warning were a whirlwind for Emma. She had always known the world he inhabited was dangerous, but now, the true weight of it was beginning to sink in. There was no turning back. As much as she had promised herself she could handle it, the stakes were getting higher, and with each passing day, the tension around them grew thicker. They weren't just playing a game anymore. They were on the edge of something far bigger than either of them. It started with the phone calls. Late at night, when Dominic would return to the penthouse, his demeanor was colder, more distant. He would spend hours on the phone, speaking in hushed tones with people she didn't recognize, his voice sharp, demanding. Emma had learned to stay in the background, giving him space when he needed it, but the unease she felt was growing. One evening, as Dominic finished a call and hung up, he looked over at her. She had been reading a book in the corner, but she couldn't hide the curiosity in her eyes. Dominic didn't miss it. Something's wrong, he said suddenly, his voice low, his eyes narrowing. They're moving faster than I thought. Emma stood up, walking toward him. What do you mean? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There's a rival family moving in. They've been gathering strength for months, and I've been underestimating them. They want my territory, and they'll stop at nothing to take it. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What does that mean for you? Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his face tense. It means war, Emma, and it means I can't protect you the way I promised. Her stomach dropped. She had known the stakes, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way she hadn't anticipated. So what happens now? She asked, her voice steady, despite the fear rising inside her. We fight, Dominic said, his tone hardening. We defend what's mine. But it's not just business anymore. People will get hurt. And you, he paused, his gaze intense. You're not safe anymore. No one is. Emma took a step forward, standing taller than she felt. I'm not afraid, Dominic. I've made my choice. I'm with you. His eyes softened for a brief moment, a flicker of something that wasn't cold calculation. He walked toward her, his presence almost overwhelming. This is no longer about money or power. It's survival, and you need to be ready for what's coming. The weight of his words hung in the air, and Emma knew he was right. There was no going back, no pretending anymore. She had chosen this world, and now, it was pulling her deeper into its dangerous depths. The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings and tense phone calls. Dominic's empire was under siege, and every decision had to be calculated carefully. Emma watched as he shifted seamlessly between business mogul and ruthless leader, navigating the complexities of the criminal world with ease. But with each passing day, she saw a new side of him. The strain, the exhaustion, the burden of being a leader in a world where betrayal was as common as loyalty. One night, after another grueling day of planning, Dominic sat down across from her, his eyes tired but determined. He had been silent for most of the evening, lost in his thoughts. Tomorrow is a crucial day, he said, breaking the silence. We make our move, and we show them who's in charge. I can't afford to lose, Emma. Not this time. Emma nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. She had seen the way he operated, the way he commanded respect. But this was different. This was war. And Dominic was no longer just playing the role of the powerful Mafia boss. He was fighting for his survival, and Emma was right there with him, whether she was ready or not. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady, but her mind racing with everything that could go wrong. Whatever happens, I'm not backing down. Dominic didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, his eyes searching. For a brief moment, the walls he had so carefully built around himself seemed to slip, and Emma saw something more: vulnerability, fear, and the unmistakable weight of responsibility. You don't know what you're saying, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Once we start, there's no stopping it. I know, she said, her voice strong, more confident than she felt. But I'm not afraid. Not anymore. Dominic didn't smile, but there was a brief flash of something in his eyes, a flicker of appreciation, maybe even respect. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the familiar coldness she had grown used to. Tomorrow, then, he said, standing up. We do this my way, and we don't look back. Emma watched him walk away, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no illusions anymore. She was in this, not as a bystander, but as a partner in the fight. And the war was about to begin. As she sat there, alone in the dimly lit penthouse, the reality of it all settled in. She had crossed a line, and now, she was in the heart of it. There was no going back. And as dangerous as it was, there was no place else she would rather be. The morning of the attack arrived faster than Emma had anticipated. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy weight that pressed down on her chest. Dominic had been meticulous in his planning, every move calculated. But now, as they prepared for the confrontation, the reality of the situation hit her with full force. There was no going back. Dominic had spent the entire night making calls, coordinating with his men, ensuring everything was in place. Emma had remained in the background, as instructed, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that she was more involved than she should be. As much as Dominic tried to shield her, he couldn't protect her from the danger that was about to unfold. She had already made her choice, but now, it felt like everything was spiraling out of her control. They met in the penthouse, the city's skyline stretching out before them. The usual sense of power that Dominic exuded was there, but it was accompanied by an undercurrent of something more: fear. Not the kind of fear that would make him falter, but the kind that came from knowing how close they were to losing everything. His empire, his reputation, his life. You ready? Dominic's voice was low, almost weary, as he looked at Emma. She nodded, her heart racing. As ready as I'll ever be. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he took a step closer to her. This won't be easy. We're not just fighting for control. We're fighting for survival. And once we take action, there's no turning back. Emma swallowed hard, but her resolve didn't waver. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when she had come this far. She had chosen this life, and no matter how dangerous it had become, she would face it head on. I know, she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. But I'm not afraid, Dominic. I'm with you all the way. For a moment, Dominic just stared at her, his gaze intense. Then, slowly he nodded. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Trust. Respect. It was the first time Emma felt that he truly saw her as an equal in this dangerous game they were playing. The plan was set. The rival family, the ones who had been making moves behind Dominic's back, had finally made their play. They thought they had the upper hand, but Dominic had been preparing for this moment. He had eyes everywhere, and now, it was time to make a move. The hours before the attack were the longest Emma had ever experienced. She spent most of the time with Dominic, sitting silently in the penthouse, watching him as he worked. He was focused, sharp, every decision a calculated move toward taking control. But beneath the surface, Emma could see the strain, the burden of leadership, the weight of the choices he had made. It was a side of him she hadn't fully understood before, but now, it felt like she was seeing the true cost of the life he had built. The call came just after sunset. Dominic's expression changed instantly, his eyes hardening as he listened to the voice on the other end of the line. Emma could hear the urgency in his voice as he spoke. The time had come. He hung up the phone and turned to her. It's time, he said, his voice clipped. Get ready. We're making our move now. Emma's stomach flipped, but she nodded, moving quickly to follow him. She had seen him in action before. Calm, collected, the leader he had always been. But now, as they made their way to the door, she felt the weight of the situation settling in. This was it. There was no turning back. They left the penthouse in silence, moving through the underground tunnels that connected Dominic's empire. The city felt different tonight, the air thick with anticipation. Emma couldn't help but glance over at Dominic, his jaw set in determination. For all the power he commanded, she saw the flicker of something else in his eyes. Fear, yes, but also a deep sense of responsibility. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everything he had built, for everything that mattered to him. The moment they reached the rendezvous point, everything changed. The air was electric with tension as Dominic and his men moved into position, ready to strike. Emma stayed close behind him, her nerves on edge. She had known this was coming, but the reality of it was harder to face than she had imagined. As the first shots rang out, everything became a blur. Dominic moved with precision, his commands sharp and quick. Emma stayed close, doing her part, but it was clear that this was not just a battle for power, it was a battle for survival. She had seen the violence in Dominic's world, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered chaos, and she was right in the middle of it. The fight seemed endless, each moment dragging on as Dominic's men fought back with everything they had. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she followed him, her eyes scanning the chaos around them. It wasn't just about territory anymore. This was personal. And in that moment, Emma knew just how far Dominic was willing to go to protect everything he had fought for. Finally, after what felt like hours, the fighting subsided. The rival family had been pushed back, but the damage had been done. Emma stood next to Dominic, her breath heavy, her body still tense with adrenaline. Dominic turned to her, his face hard but with a flicker of something else. You did well, he said quietly. Emma met his gaze, her heart still racing. We did it. He nodded, his expression unreadable. This is far from over, he said. But it's a step in the right direction. Emma felt the weight of his words, but she didn't flinch. She had made her choice. And now, there was no turning back. The aftermath of the battle left everything in a tense, uneasy silence. Emma stood alongside Dominic, watching the destruction that had unfolded in the wake of their victory. The sounds of gunfire, the shouts of men, the crackling tension in the air, they had all faded away, replaced by the heavy weight of what had just transpired. The rival family had been pushed back, but at what cost? The power dynamic had shifted, but there were still enemies watching, waiting for their chance to strike. Dominic's eyes scanned the area, his gaze cold, assessing the damage, his mind already moving to the next steps. Emma could see the exhaustion in his posture, the tension in his shoulders. He was a man who rarely showed weakness, but there were moments like these, moments when the gravity of it all settled in. He was not invincible. He was just a man, carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders, a weight that was getting heavier with each passing day. We did it, Emma said, her voice breaking the silence between them. We held them off. Dominic didn't answer right away, his focus still on the men around them, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. It wasn't over. It could never be over in this world. Yeah, he muttered, almost to himself. We did. But it's not enough. Emma turned to him, confusion crossing her face. What do you mean? We won. We held the line. Dominic's jaw tightened as he looked at her, his eyes dark with frustration. We've won battles before, Emma. This isn't just about fighting back. It's about surviving. They'll come at us again. They'll keep pushing, keep testing us. We have to be ready. Emma's heart beat faster at the weight of his words. She had always known the risks, but hearing Dominic speak about it so plainly, so matter-of-factly, made it all the more real. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was their reality. Constantly on edge, constantly fighting, constantly protecting everything they had built. We need to hit them harder, Dominic said, turning away from her and walking toward the meeting room where his men had gathered. We need to send a message. If we don't, they'll think we're weak, that we can be taken down. Emma followed him, her mind racing. She had known this was coming, that the danger was never truly behind them. But the way Dominic spoke about it, so calm, so detached, it made her realize just how deep this went. He wasn't just fighting for control. He was fighting to keep his life, his empire, intact. Every move he made, every decision, was a step in a high-stakes game of survival. Inside the meeting room, the tension was palpable. Dominic's men sat around the table, waiting for his instructions. As he entered, the room fell silent. He looked at each of them, his gaze sharp, assessing, before he spoke. We're not waiting for them to make the next move. We're taking the fight to them. This ends now. There was no hesitation in his voice, no second-guessing. He had made up his mind, and now they all had to follow. Emma took a seat near the table, watching the men nod in agreement. This was the life she had chosen. This was the life she was in now. Everyone's to stay on high alert, Dominic continued. We move out within the hour. No one goes off the radar. No mistakes. His eyes flicked to Emma briefly, then back to the room. We need to make sure they know we won't back down. The plan was set in motion almost immediately, the men dispersing to execute their orders. Emma stayed close to Dominic, her thoughts swirling. This was more than just a battle now. This was a war. And in a war, there were no guarantees. Dominic walked up to her as the others filtered out of the room, his expression unreadable. You don't have to stay, Emma. I've already told you what's at stake. You've seen what this life demands. Emma stood her ground, her eyes meeting his with determination. I'm not going anywhere, Dominic. I told you. I'm with you. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, with a slow nod, he turned toward the door. Then stay out of the way. Let me handle the rest. As they left the room, Emma felt the weight of the moment settle on her. She wasn't just following him anymore. She was part of this world, for better or worse. There was no going back. No second chances. The hours that followed were a blur of preparations, movements, and silent anticipation. Dominic's men had begun their strategy, preparing for the counterattack that would strike at the heart of the rival family's operations. Emma could see the intensity in their eyes, the same look she had seen in Dominic's earlier. It wasn't just about power. It was about survival. And every decision now carried the weight of their future. When the time came, they moved quickly, silently, like shadows slipping through the streets of the city. Emma was with them, every step more dangerous than the last. The adrenaline rushed through her veins as she followed Dominic, her mind sharp, her senses heightened. This was no longer just a fight for control. This was a fight for their lives. And as the first strike was made, Emma realized just how deep she was now. There was no escaping this world. She was in it, completely, and there was no turning back. The hours after the first strike were a blur of chaos and action. The night was cold, the city streets quieter than usual, as Dominic's men moved quickly, taking control of the rival family's territory with precision. Emma followed closely behind, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she watched everything unfold. She had known this life would be dangerous, but now that she was in the heart of it, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a fight for power. It was a fight for survival. Dominic had become a different person in these moments. The cold, calculating leader she had grown used to was still there, but now, there was something sharper in him, something more determined. He wasn't just protecting his empire anymore. He was fighting for his life, and that made him even more dangerous. Emma had seen the fire in his eyes when he spoke about the rival family. She had known from the beginning that Dominic wasn't the kind of man to back down, but now, as she watched him lead his men through the streets, she saw the full extent of what he was willing to do to protect everything he had built. She had thought she understood the risks, but seeing him like this made her realize how deep she was now. There was no escaping this world. The night wore on, and they continued their assault on the rival family's operations. Emma was no longer just watching from the sidelines. She was part of it, her actions just as crucial as the men who fought beside her. Every move had to be calculated. Every decision had to be made in the blink of an eye. There was no room for hesitation. By the time they reached the heart of the rival family's stronghold, Emma's hands were shaking. The tension in the air was thick, the sense of danger palpable. She could feel the weight of everything Dominic had said, the warning that once they made this move, there would be no turning back. But it was too late to turn back now. She was in this, just as much as he was. She had chosen this life, and now, there was no escape. Dominic led them to the front door, his men surrounding the building. He was focused, his eyes scanning every corner, every potential threat. The silence was deafening, the only sounds being the distant hum of the city and the muffled footsteps of their team moving into position. Emma's breath came in shallow bursts, the tension nearly unbearable. "We move fast, we move silent," Dominic said in a low voice, his words calm but firm. "This ends tonight." Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen Dominic's strength, his ruthless drive to protect what was his. But now, standing next to him, she saw the cost of it. The sacrifices, the endless battles. There was no end to this world, no peace. This was the life he had chosen, and by extension, it had become her life too. They stormed the building, moving quickly, the sound of footsteps echoing in the halls as they took down the rival family's men one by one. It was methodical, precise, like a well-oiled machine. Emma moved with them, her instincts sharp as she followed the others through the building, staying low, staying quiet. Every corner was a potential threat, every door a possible ambush. The deeper they went, the more intense the situation became. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. Everything was happening too fast. But through it all, Emma couldn't ignore the growing sense of fear in her chest. She had seen violence before, had been around it, but never this up close. This wasn't just a business deal gone wrong. This was a war, and the stakes were higher than anything she had ever imagined. Finally, they reached the heart of the rival family's operation, a large room, dimly lit, with a few men standing guard. The tension in the air was almost suffocating as Dominic and his men moved in, weapons drawn. Emma followed closely behind, her mind racing as she prepared herself for what was coming. As they entered the room, all hell broke loose. The rival family's men fired, the shots ringing out in the confined space. Dominic and his team returned fire, taking down their targets with ruthless efficiency. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her hands shaking as she moved, dodging behind cover, her mind focused solely on the task at hand. In the chaos of the fight, Emma caught sight of one of the rival family's leaders. He was standing near the back, trying to make an escape. Without thinking, Emma moved toward him, her body moving on autopilot as she sprinted through the room, dodging bullets, her eyes locked on her target. She was almost there when a shot rang out, hitting the wall just inches from her. She stopped dead in her tracks, heart pounding in her chest. But there was no time to think. The leader was just ahead. With one final push, Emma lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him to the ground. "Not today," she muttered under her breath, the adrenaline surging through her as she held him down, making sure he couldn't move. Dominic was by her side in an instant, his expression unreadable as he helped her restrain the man. "Nice work," he said, his voice cold but with a hint of approval. Emma didn't say anything. She was too focused, too caught up in the moment to process his words. This was what they had come here for. This was the final blow to the rival family's operations. As the fighting subsided and the last of their enemies were taken down, Emma stood there, breathing heavily, her body still tense. The reality of what they had just done began to set in. This was their world now. This was the price they paid for power. And there was no going back. Dominic looked at her, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something more in him, something human. "You're in this now," he said softly. "For better or worse." Emma nodded, her resolve solidifying. She was in it. And no matter what happened next, she wasn't backing down. The aftermath of the battle left everything in a haze of destruction and blood. The rival family had been dealt a crushing blow, but the cost was still sinking in. Dominic's empire had grown, but so had the number of enemies who would be watching, waiting for the next move. The room was still, the echoes of gunfire fading into the distance as Emma stood next to Dominic, both of them taking in the quiet that followed the storm. The weight of the moment hung in the air. Emma's body was still tense from the adrenaline of the fight, but there was no escaping the realization that things had shifted. She wasn't just a spectator in Dominic's world anymore. She was a part of it, and that meant the consequences of their actions were now hers to bear as well. Dominic turned to her, his eyes unreadable. His usual calm was there, but there was something different in the way he looked at her now. The vulnerability from earlier in the night was gone, replaced by the hardened exterior that made him who he was. But for a split second, Emma saw something flicker in his gaze, something that made her heart beat faster. "We've won," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But this war isn't over. It's only just begun." Emma nodded, her mind processing his words. She had seen the power struggle, the lives lost, and now, she understood the full weight of what she was a part of. There was no turning back. She had made her choice, and now, like Dominic, she was in this fight for survival. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked, his voice low, almost a challenge. Emma took a deep breath. She had already faced too much to back down now. She had seen the cost of the life she had chosen, but she had also seen the strength in Dominic, the strength that had brought him to where he was now. If she wanted to stand beside him, to be part of this world, she had to embrace it fully. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Whatever comes next, I'm with you." Dominic's expression softened for just a moment. It was the first time she had seen him let his guard down completely since the night they had first met. For a split second, she thought he might say something that would change everything, but he didn't. Instead, he just nodded, the briefest flash of something like respect crossing his features. "Good," he said quietly. "Then we move forward together." The words carried weight, more than she had expected. Emma didn't just want to be part of this life. She was now embedded in it, her destiny tied to Dominic's. She knew the danger that came with it, the constant threat of betrayal, the fragile balance of power. But as she stood there with him, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. There were still enemies to fight, still alliances to be made and broken. But as Dominic turned away, leading her out of the room, Emma felt a strange sense of purpose settling inside her. She had chosen this world, this life, and now, it was hers to navigate. The cost was high, but so was the reward. She wasn't just the woman behind the Mafia boss anymore. She was part of it. She was ready for whatever came next. And as Dominic looked over his shoulder, meeting her gaze one last time before they walked into the unknown, she knew that their story had only just begun. In this gripping tale of power, survival, and unexpected love, a woman becomes entangled in the dangerous world of a Mafia boss. As their relationship evolves, so does the tension, leading to thrilling moments of passion and loyalty. This story takes readers deep into the heart of intrigue, betrayal, and desire, offering a unique blend of suspense and emotional depth. As their bond strengthens, both must face the brutal realities of the world they live in. With powerful characters and a plot full of twists and turns, this is one of those romance stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. As the fight for power intensifies, the stakes rise, and the romance between them becomes more complicated than ever. Whether it's the raw emotions or the fiery chemistry, this narrative offers a captivating journey that will make it hard to look away. Fans of romance stories won't be disappointed by the intense passion and undeniable connection that unfold between these two characters. In a world where trust is scarce, they will have to decide if love is worth the ultimate cost. This dark and alluring tale is perfect for anyone who loves romance stories with a blend of danger and desire. Immerse yourself in the world of complex relationships and the tension that builds with each passing moment.